Yeah, this is definitely an opening if you want to calculate.
Was I think Grishuk said that chess is a battle between wanting to win and not wanting to calculate.
Oh yeah, that is indeed true.
Part two of the Nimzo Indian line, the Seamus variation with Dormantpatzerino. So welcome again, Dormant.
Thanks for the welcome, and welcome everyone to the stream. So, whenever you're ready, we can start.
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Okay. So, as you can, it's d4, knight f6, c4. Well, it's an Nimzo Indian, everyone knows that. a3 is the move that characterizes the Samisch. Bishop takes, b takes, b6, f3. And now the move that actually keeps white in the game, keeps black in the game, which is bishop to a6, which actually makes a lot of sense. It pressures the c4 pawn, and if you've already made doubled pawns, you should at least attack them.
That's a fair point. Hey, how's it going, Tobify? Yeah. This is the beginning of building up on the C pawn here, which it's really the whole point of or a big part of taking the knight.
And the whole point of the opening, actually.
Yeah. It's important to not miss this part of it.
Yeah. So we have now e4 by white, and now knight to c6, which looks like a very weird move, blocking your c-pawn. Can you actually tell me what the idea is behind this move?
Yeah, so the idea is to actually put the knight on a5. How's it going, Locutus? Put the knight on a5 and attack the... Oh my gosh, I cannot draw arrows. Here we go. This and this to attack the c4 pawn with 2 pieces.
Precisely. And if instead of knight c6 we try d6 and bishop to d3, knight bd7, well, that's a very passive position and it doesn't promise black anything.
Yeah, white just has a huge center here, and it's hard to start getting an advantage, I would imagine.
Yeah. So after e4 we have knight to c6, bishop to d3, the natural developing move for white. Now knight a5, the whole point. And now we have two main options. We have e5, which we'll look at later, and queen e2, defending the pawn with further protection by the queen.
Okay.
So we'll look at queen e2, to which black replies d6, which we'll see the idea behind it later on. We have knight h3, queen d7, and that's the idea behind the d6, is to put the queen either on c6 or on a4 to add further pressure to the c4 pawn.
Yeah, white's out of pieces to defend.
Indeed. So he rolls rook to b1, hoping to meet queen c6 or a6 with rook b4, to which black replies c5, stopping rook b4.
This is an interesting pawn structure, really, for both sides. This little L, and then I don't even know what I would call this for the black structure.
Me neither. It looks like a snake or something.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some official name somewhere, because everything has to have a name in chess, but yeah, it's not a pawn structure that happens very often, I feel like.
Yeah, neither does bishop a6 and knight a5 in conjunction.
That's true too.
It's a very weird opening where if you want to keep an advantage, you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. This is where forcing yourself to learn a little bit of theory definitely comes into play.
Indeed. So after c5, we have castles by white and queen a4, so continuing on with the ideas. And now bishop f4. Now that the queen has left the defense of the d6 pawn, white attacks it. But it is adequately defended by knight takes c4, because you can't take the knight with the bishop, because that will, well, it will lose you the exchange at least.
Yeah, that's a cool little tactic there.
So white presses on with d5, black closes with e5, bishop to g5, hoping to inflict double pawns on black. So black sidesteps that with knight d7. We have knight f2 trying to get the knight back into the game. f3 kicking the bishop away. Bishop drops back to c1 to protect the a3 pawn, which was under attack by the knight and the queen. And we have b5, cementing that knight on c4.
Yeah, it seems like that both sides have been making very logical moves here, but it does seem that black is gaining the advantage.
Indeed.
This is a cool game.
And now white presses on with f4, trying to bust open the position, trying to create an attack on the king side, which is what you should be doing as white, as we've seen before. And now a very brave move. Castle's queen side.
not a move that would jump out to me as the safest thing in the world. But I guess it makes a lot of sense here, because if white's just trying to open up the king side, then don't put your king there.
Indeed, and it's actually harder to bust open the position on the queen side than it is on the king side, surprisingly.
The more I look at it, the more it makes sense, because these two pawns are blockaded. The center is completely frozen. So there's really... There's a semi-open file, but it's going to take a lot of work to try to get anything going there. And white has the pawn locked down pretty well, so...
Yep.
Castling this way does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, do keep that in mind, because in many lines you castle queenside. And so, continuing on, we have bishop to c2, kicking the queen away, queen a5, a4, trying to bust the position open, e takes on f4, a takes on b5, bishop takes on b5, and now bishop to d3, because black was threatening to play knight a3 and winning the exchange with the knight or with the bishop if the queen moved. So white had to defend that. And now we could continue with the game, or we could try an idea found by the engines in this position.
Yeah, we can look at the idea while we're here.
Okay.
And then yeah, maybe we'll look at this idea and then maybe keep rolling, just focusing on the opening a little bit. Yeah.
So the idea is f3, sacking a pawn.
Okay.
To which white replies g takes on f3, knight d e5, bishop f4, because you couldn't move the light, you couldn't save the light square bishop without losing the exchange again. So you grab the light square bishop, knight takes, now g5, and bishop to g3 and a6. And although the position is equal, it's much easier to play as black than it is for white. You've got a kingside attack coming. No, let me draw an arrow there. If you manage to kick the bishop away, you can actually pile up on the knight. And it's going to be a tough game for white for sure.
Yeah, just trying to stave off the attack. Yeah. Yeah, I don't that F3 move is a crazy way to start it off, but it makes sense. I
Yep,
mean, if you find the next like 5 moves too, yeah.
indeed.
That's the tricky part, I guess.
So we have back to the position after bishop to d3, preventing the loss of the exchange. We have in the game knight e5 immediately. To which black replies with bishop takes f4, knight takes on d3, knight takes on d3, rook h e1, and queen f2 is just dropping, just getting out of the pin. Knight to a3, attacking the rook. And now white actually manages to sack the exchange to open up the black king's position, but it doesn't quite work, as we'll see in the game. So we have rook takes on d6, queen takes on c5, queen c7, and now just white forcing the issue with rook takes on b5, knight takes on b5, queen takes, and now notice that black is up the exchange. Yes, black is up the exchange.
With immediate pressure on a couple pawns here.
Indeed, to which one of them is immediately dropped off, picked off. Knight to c5, attacking the rook. Now you counterattack the queen with rook b6, queen to a5. Now rook to e2, knight to e6, and now just rook takes g2 and rook takes g2 check, and that's GG. Because if you sidestep to the corner, well, that's checkmate. And if you capture the rook, then rook b2 check actually picks up the queen.
There's a lot of tactics for black, but I guess that's the benefit when you have space and active pieces.
And a superior position.
Game. It's a good game.
Also, after queen e2, there's also a safe option which denies both sides a lot of tactics and promises an equal game. After queen e2, it's knight b3, rook b1, knight takes on c1, rook takes on c1, castles, e5, knight h5, knight h3, and queen h4 check. And the position is equal, but it's much more solid for both sides. Like, there's no crazy tactics going on, and the better player should win, whoever side it plays.
That's scary. Those are positions I lose.
Yeah, same.
Okay, but yeah, it's an interesting variation to consider. It's kind of like the black's pieces are just kind of scattered to the wind out to the sides of the board, but he's got a very flexible pawn structure here. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So back into the main game. After knight to a5, instead of queen to e2, we have e5. I mean, white just says, if you attack my pawn, well, I'm going to attack your piece, and you actually have to retreat with knight to g8. Surprisingly enough, because if you go to knight to h5, well, that doesn't bode well for you. Because after
I've gotten my knight trapped here more times than I'd like to admit.
Yeah,
with making this exact move.
And that is precisely the problem. The knight is going to be trapped in almost all the variations, unless you play g6 and fianchetto it. But then you're weakening your dark squares, and white has a dark square bishop, so
yeah,
it's not going to be easy. So let's say bishop takes on c4. Just, well, black says, well, I managed to win a pawn. Great. Well, g4 now.
Yeah.
and the knight is trapped. Even after queen to h4 check, you got knight to f2. And notice how knight to g3 doesn't work, because then this knight is protecting the rook.
Some convenient board geometry there.
Same idea if after knight to h3 you play queen to h4 check immediately. Just king steps to the corner, and you actually have to play h6 because white was threatening to trap the queen. The queen would have been trapped if you'd done nothing.
That's not something that crosses the radar. But I guess, yeah, if you look at it, there's not a lot. This pawn guards these squares, and then the knight and the bishop. Okay.
So we have knight f2, and now black says, okay, I'm going to pick up the pawn now. Surely there's no problem. Well, same problem as before, the knight is trapped.
Yeah, exact same position. Or at least on the squares that matter here.
Indeed.
Okay.
So you have to retreat. After e5, the correct move is knight to g8 to avoid all those problems.
Yeah.
So we have queen to a4, adding protection to the c4 pawn and also pinning the knight to the bishop and adding protection. To which black replies c5, and the plan is to take on d4, put a rook behind, put the queen, and add further pressure to c4 that way.
That's interesting. Yeah, I always like even like when you blockade with like a knight, or in this case a pawn, and then piling up your major pieces behind it to unleash them all at once. That's always kind of a fun little strategic idea.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Works like a charm, actually.
Yeah. Because it doesn't seem that strong until that piece or pawn moves, and then it gets scary.
Yeah, and so we have bishop to e3. D takes on c5 has also been tried, to which you pick up the pawn on c4, and now queen h4 check, because you have to pick up the piece somehow. After g3, queen takes, knight takes, c takes on b6, a takes on b6, f4, protecting the e5 pawn, and now knight a7, knight f6, knight f3, and now knight to d5. And there's no way white can protect both pawns. If you go bishop to b2, well, the knight just takes that. If you go bishop to d2, well, just knight takes, king takes.
Yeah, and that bishop is completely entombed behind its own pawns there.
Indeed, and you're just gonna pile up on the pressure on the c3 pawn. Yeah, it doesn't look good for white. So in the game, after c5, instead of d takes on c5, we have bishop to e3, queen c7, keeping true to the plan of going c takes and adding pressure after the pawn takes, rook to c1, and now knight e7. Keep in mind that after rook to c1, rook c8 was also possible with the same idea that I mentioned before. So knight e2, c takes, bishop takes, knight takes, castles, knight e7, rook to c2, queen c6, offering a queen trade, queen b3, and now b5, just securing the knight on the c4 square. And black is a clean pawn up.
Yeah, that was a nice little sequence right there to solve the pin problem. They go for the queen trade and then protect the b5 square. I like that. Yeah.
So in the game, we have after rook to c1, we have knight e7, knight e2, queen c6, offering a queen trade. Actually, a pretty good move, because if you trade, you're dropping off one protector of the c4 pawn for a piece that isn't attacking it.
And this knight probably gets to come into the game at the same time over on the queen side.
Oh, that is true. Forgot to mention that. So we have a queen c2, refusing the queen trade, but that just drops a pawn, to which white tries a little trick. Knight d5, attacking the unprotected piece. Bishop f2, b takes on c5, bishop takes on c4, knight takes on c4, queen e4, and knight d e3, offering a queen trade again. After queen e4, queen a6, dropping, avoiding double pawns also works. After bishop takes on c5, well, it seems like you're dropping a pawn, but you're not, because after rook to c8, bishop to d4, you just pick up the a3 pawn. And after king f2, threatening to put the rook there and win the a7 pawn, you push it to a5 to give it the protection of the knight. And now after rook to a1, you go to queen e7, which is the only active square the queen has left. And black emerges a pawn up again, and should be winning in this position.
Yeah, I guess you're playing around that you have an outside pass pawn. Probably throw a castle in at some point since the king can't move up, and then pile up pressure here, something to attack. Again, you can probably go with the strategy of doubling behind the blockade here, and then moving away.
Yep.
Cool.
So in the game, after queen to e4, we have knight d e3, offering a queen trade. And you can't actually win a piece by this, because you would just take here, and take here. So quick heads up. So we have, after knight d e3, we have queen takes on c6, b takes, and d takes, and it's actually black who now has doubled pawns, but his knights are so superior that it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah, this knight is just doing everything. Like you can't ask for much more from this guy, and blockading.
Yeah, he's all in one.
Yeah.
Super knight, you would call.
Super knight. I like that.
So we have a knight f4 by white, and now queenside castle again. Again, it's the side where you prefer to castle. Because now that there aren't that many pieces in the game, there isn't much possibility for a checkmate, and it's where your king is most active, and you already put the rook on an open file. And the play is actually going to revolve around the queen side, if you analyze the position.
I guess that makes sense, because the king side pawns are pretty sturdy as of right now. The queen side is really the only pawns that can be targeted.
Yeah, and that's where black has the pawn majority, so it's where he wants the action to be. So we have bishop takes on e3, just hopelessly giving up the bishop for a knight. Knight takes on e3, queen e2, knight c4, adding pressure to the e5 and a3 pawns, and also blockading the c3 pawn. To which knight d3 is played, protecting the e5 pawn, and also attacking the c5 pawn, to which black replied rook to d5, protecting, and also adding further pressure to e5. f4, and now king c7. Not taking the a3 pawn immediately, because that would allow white some counterplay with the rook to a1 and pick up the a7 pawn. Then there's threats of rook a8 check. Actually, let me just show it on the board.
Anybody that see me play more than 3 games of chess knows that I would take that pawn immediately. But yeah, this is a good example of why you should think that out a little bit more than just grabbing a free pawn.
Yeah, that actually doesn't work. And you can't play knight to b5 because that would run into a fork. So you'd have to go back with the knight and then just, well, this is threatening too much and allowing white too much counterplay.
Yeah, that's hard to stop.
Be careful when taking free pawns. Moral of the story.
Yeah. That's something I definitely have to work on. Is figuring out what situations the pawns are free and not. But yeah.
Okay, and now we're reaching the most interesting part of the game. After rook h to f1, rook b8, rook c2, knight takes on a3 now, rook to a2, and now rook to b3, protecting the knight. And adding further pressure to the 3-3 pawn, rook to c1, a5, and knight to b2. And c4, cementing the rook, and also freeing up this rook's protection to the a5 pawn if the knight ever moves. Knight to d1, knight to b5, and you can't actually take the a5 pawn, it's poisoned. Very poisoned.
Yeah, there's at least an exchange.
Yeah, you're gonna win the exchange.
Yeah,
with knight takes on c3 check.
Opening up the rook along the 5th. Okay.
So after knight to b5, we have rook a4, rook a3, and rook takes on a3. Also look that the c4 pawn was hanging, but it would allow black a lot of play. It's a really interesting pawn sacrifice. Well, you would get your pawn back, but you have rook a2 check, king f1, rook dd2, knight e3, rook f2 check, king g1, rook f e2, rook e4 protecting the knight, and now knight takes c3. And you can't take the knight because of rook to a1 check, and that would win you the exchange. For example, like this, the king has nowhere to go, so you'd have to block with the knight here, and you would pick up this rook.
Another. I don't know. That doesn't really count as a discovery attack. I wonder what would that tactic fall under?
A pin, probably.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess it could be like a combination of like a pin and a discovery.
And this is the point of this whole opening, is there's a lot of tactics behind it for black.
Which so never hurts to work on calculating and playing attacking chess.
Yeah, this is definitely an opening if you want to calculate.
I think Grishuk said that chess is a battle between wanting to win and not wanting to calculate.
Oh yeah, that is indeed true.
It's pretty true.
So we have in this position, after rook a3, rook takes on a3, knight takes on a3, rook a1, knight b5, king e1, a4. Oh, the same idea works here. If you take the a5 pawn, you would drop the exchange. And after king to e1, sidestepping that, you play a4, adding another poison to the pawn. Can you tell me? Actually, I'll just show you what happens if you take that pawn. Yeah, indeed, you figured it out immediately. Good job.
It's a classic Wii chess puzzle here.
Yep.
Yeah. Just forcing the king over to the forking square here.
Someone's doing good on tactics. So after this, we have knight to e3, knight takes on c3, another pawn, knight takes on c4, and also notice that the knight could capture on d5, winning the exchange. But after c takes, king d2, and d4, how are you going to stop all those passed pawns?
Yeah, the connected pass pawns with the knight already there. Yeah, yeah.
And an outside passed pawn, the king coming over.
It's
There's
too
nothing
much.
to do on the king side. It's equal in pawns. It's too much for white. Black is absolutely winning.
With best play, of course.
With best play, of course.
But yeah, here you have a little bit of room for error.
Indeed. So we have after knight takes on c3, knight takes on c4, rook to d4 attacking the knight, knight to b2, and knight to d6 was also a possibility, trying to entrench onto black's position, but rook takes f4 protects the f7 pawn attacked by the knight. We have rook to c1, knight to d5, knight e8 check, picking up the g7 pawn, and now rook to g4, knight h5, and rook takes on g2. As you can see, even if white tries a lot of tricks in this position, it's still black has still got this counterplay. So,
yeah, this is just too many pawns at this point. Yeah, the king is completely cut off from the position. Yeah, it's not good.
So after rook to d4, we have knight to b2, rook takes on f4, rook to a3, king e4 check, king f2, rook e2 check, and king f3, and that's GG. You're just dropping a piece.
Yeah, later.
The knight is, even if you take the knight and take the knight, you can always, you have, well, two passed pawns.
And if you take the knight, and here.
Yeah, there's no way that the king can reach that. He is outside of the box.
Yeah. Yeah, grandmasters are pretty good at chess.
Yeah, great masters are pretty good at chess, and that's about it for this variation. Do you want to look over something or anything?
Let's go back to. I think the ideas were covered pretty well here. Just to go over the idea again of like what the pressure point is and how this all starts, attacking the c4 pawn. This is an important note, I would say. It's kind of like the only move.
Yeah, it's an only move.
Yeah, and then just slowly building up your position, and you just eventually get more pieces than white does over to the queen side. But yeah.
And okay, and also do keep in mind that queen e2 completely changes the nature of the game to how you apply pressure on the c4 pawn. You have to do it another way, with d6 and queen to d7 to put it on c6 or a4, and after rook to b1, c5 is an important move to stop that. And no matter what, you're still gaining the c4 pawn as black.
Yeah, and a pawn it's very influential, especially into the later games, and just the piece activity that we saw that black was able to achieve here is, as if you play it well, then you can take it to the victory.
Yep, indeed. But next time we'll have to look at a move that actually keeps the game equal. But it's very complicated play for white.
Definitely something to look forward to.
Okay, so I guess that's about it for this.
Awesome.
For this chapter.
Thank you again, Dormantpatzerino, for sharing some of the insights that you've studied. I've definitely learned a lot from this. I'm looking forward to see if I can get a Nimzo game, which actually happens pretty often, given that is an opening that I play. I guess it's.
I was actually thinking of playing the Nimzo Indian against you to give you a chance to breathe, because you don't have a lot of good results against the King's Indian.
Hey, okay, so just a heads up, I did spend some time today studying some King's Indian ideas. So
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I'm trying to learn some counters to your A5 knight A6. So get ready for that.
Okay then. Guess I'll bid farewell to everyone, and hope everyone has fun playing you and watching you play.
All right, yeah, thank you again.